Welcome to the Art Ladies channel. Today the lesson is on birds, and we're going to be doing some large tropical rainforest birds. And today with me I have some second graders that are going to help me, and I'm going to show you some of their wonderful examples in the end. So that's something fun to look at. And this is a school in Florida, Central Florida. And so we're going to do these as imaginary birds, okay? So we can base our birds off of real birds and then do some fun things to them. So as we're drawing this bird today, I want you to think of, some fun creative things that you can add to your bird, okay? And it's going to be very simple. If we look, we want to make sure there's some things that are very important. We want to make sure that the head isn't too close to the top. You need to leave some space that's empty, and when we have empty space, it's called negative space, right around here. But you don't want to leave too much, because then it'll be kind of boring, and you'll have to fill it with stuff. I want the main focus of this picture to be your bird. So the bird is going to have to be larger than your hand. Look at that. Okay. So we're making a large bird today, not a really small bird on a big piece of paper. Let me show you an example of a bird that's too small. Right here. You see how this bird is really small on this large paper. So we're not going to do that. I want the bird to be bigger than your hand. Another thing that's real important is you don't want the important parts of your subject, and the bird is our subject, to be really, really close to the edge of the paper. Sometimes we make them so close that it ends up cutting off some of the beak. So we don't want to do that either. So we want to be aware of our edges here. Now, it's okay if the back end of the bird's being cut off, look, because that's not the main focus. We want the head of the bird to be all intact. So that's something to think about. You could even shorten the beak or even have it longer coming down, looking downward, if you always run out of room. So an artist always thinks about creative ways. Now let's begin our picture, and we're going to start by putting the eye. Look where the word top is. We're going to come down, and we're almost going to put it in the center here. We could start it right in the center. So I'm going to find my center mark here, and I'm going to drop down just 2 fingers. So I'm measuring 2 fingers, okay? And then I'm going to put a horizontal line. That'll be the top of my head, right in the middle of my page. So I find side, side, I find the center, drop down 2 fingers, and put a little guideline. And you can do this with a marker, or you can do this with a pencil. My kids today are using pencils. Then we're going to leave a little space, because look, we need to have room for the eyeball. Here's my guideline right here. So we're going to drop down probably 3 fingers and put a circle. Put a little line. Now I'm going to make the pupil of the eye. Make it almost as big as your fingernail. And we're not going to erase right now. We're not erasing. We just redraw a line if we don't like it. And later on we can erase it, because I'm going quickly, so you don't have time for erasing. Next, we're going to go around the eye again. So we're layering his eye. So the pupil's where your sight comes out of, and that's the black part in everybody's eye. All creatures have that black part. Then I'm going to come up, and it's going to kind of like be I don't know what you would call this, like almost a donut coming up and around, but partial. Kind of a crescent coming up and around. So I just came off of the end of this, and I went up and around. It does kind of look like a crescent. If I turned it on its side, it's like a crescent moon. And that's going to be, so let's follow with me so you understand. That's the pupil. This is the iris now. That's the color of the eye of the parrot or the bird, whatever bird you're going to make. Now I want another ring around it for the white of the eye. So I'm going to come out on this side, and I'm coming up and around. I want to exaggerate the features and make them big enough for us to paint in with brushes. If we did the features really, really small, they wouldn't be as important. So I want to exaggerate, meaning to make them bigger than life. Now, sometimes around birds, and in this particular bird here, they had like little white or bright yellow feathers. So I want another area to come around here. And the reason I'm designing it this way is because this is a large area, and I didn't want just one color in this big, large area. So I want you to do what's called a free-form shape. We're going to do a free-form shape, and a free-form shape is not a circle, it's not an oval, it's not a square. It's kind of what you would call a blob. It's something that you can't define in geometric terms like circle, oval, square, triangle. So it's circular, but then look, these lines are curvy. Slightly curvy. So I want you to make some type of a free-form shape, slightly curvy, around this whole eye. And this will just give an interesting shape around the eye. Another area for you to color in. Or however you're going to finish this, with oil pastels or paint.
That's it?
Now look at the size that you have. Now sometimes you might have more room on this side, sometimes you might have more room on this side. So measure with your hand. Which side do you have more room on? I'm almost equal. Actually, I have a little bit more room on this side, so I'm going to make the beak come off of this side. I'm going to make a number 1 really close to this free-form shape. That's a number 1. Now, I want you to envision your beak long and curving. Now, let's put a guideline in because we don't want to come off the page here, do we? So we want our beak to come out with a beautiful curve and come down. So I'm going to put a guideline in, say here. You see that? That's going to say where my beak is going to stop curving. It's almost a finger from the edge. It's almost a finger from the edge. So I'm going to now curve my beak. This is going to curve down. So I'm going to come out and curve down. And I'm going to stop. See that line? I'm going to stop. It's about this wide. So as I come out and curve down, I stopped. See this line where it comes down imaginary? Out and down. I want a nice large curving beak. This was a guideline I'm not using. So I curved out, down, but see, right here is where I stop because it matches this line. I want at least a finger. Now this next line, I'm coming over and I'm going to taper this. I'm tapering it so it's going thinner. It's going to get thinner and curve. So you can even start coming off of this as a skinny point because this is where the bird has a real thin, sharp beak, and then come up and curve to meet the top. And now I'm going to form the lower beak. I'm going to do a diagonal in toward the center, a short diagonal line, and now I'm doing the lower beak, which is smaller and shorter than the top beak. I'm coming horizontally out, and we just finished talking about horizontal lines last week, diagonal lines, vertical lines, curvy lines, zigzag, and those are the lines we're using today. So come on out horizontal and curve up. That's the lower beak. And now this is the easy part. We're going to go around the head. And this bird is going to be so large it's taking up the whole page, like I said. And we're not going to have the whole body. So I'm going to come up, curve up to this line, curve around, and then stop. See where the eye space ends? I've curved up and around. Make sure you have a nice curve to this. And remember, if you need to erase these things, go back over it and add a nice curve. Okay, and you erase later. And then come down and out. And now we're going to do the same down here. I'm going to curve, and then I'm going to almost come vertically down. And then I'll give a slight curve as I hit the bottom. I want it to be, look, as wide as my hand. So it's a pretty large bird. From here, you're going to decorate and design it your way. You can add, like I did, a curved wing. You're going to add a nice curved wing like I added, if you want to. And if you do that, look what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take my hand, bring it down, and draw around the tips. You don't want the wing too high up. And then I'm just bringing this down and curving inward. And notice it's going to go, it goes off the page. Now you can decorate your feathers any way you want to. You can decorate the background, but let me give you some tips. When you do any of the feathers, you don't want to do them super tiny and small, because look at that. That's going to be a lot to color in and paint. Hard to get brushes in there. So I take my finger and I trace around my finger. If you're going to do V shapes, you invent, or zigzag lines, or wavy lines, or curvy lines. You invent how you're going to add pattern to this bird. Maybe you want some wavy lines on the beak, okay? But remember, make everything as wide as your finger if you're going to do pattern. If you get too skinny, there's little shapes for painting in, and that's more difficult. Say I'm going to do a rainbow beak on this guy. I'm making every stripe as thick as my finger. If I draw flowers and designs in the background, look, make them as big as your fingers. Look at the leaves. Make them bigger than your finger, okay? As you design, look at blades of grass. I'm exaggerating and making it bigger than normal, bigger than what you see in the natural world, bigger than my finger. That way, I can paint it in easy when I'm done, okay? So I want you to have fun. Use your imagination. Don't make the bird like mine. You can even put stuff coming off the head of the bird. A crown. There's some birds that have natural crowns. It's made out of actual feathers. So you can use your imagination and do some really fun things. But remember, every time you make these fun shapes, make them as big as your finger. Okay? This is going to be my complete crown here. So it's pretty big. There's not a lot of little lines showing. So have fun designing, and let me know in the comments how your bird came out. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes what these kids did today, my second graders, and how they invented their birds.